Hi, I'm Sophia, 28 years old. My parents didn't come to my wedding. Not because they were busy, they chose not to. They said I was throwing my life away by marrying Daniel, a man they didn't approve of. So on my wedding day, their seats were empty. Years went by. No calls. No visits. No "How are you, Sophia?" Until last year. I bought my dream home. A $2 million house, mine. And suddenly, they remembered I existed. If you love real-life stories about betrayal, revenge, and emotional closure, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss what happens next. I grew up in what most people would call a perfect family. My dad, Richard, was a corporate lawyer. Sharp suits, sharp tongue, sharp everything. He carried himself like every word he spoke had weight, like the world was constantly evaluating him, and he needed to prove he belonged at the top. My mom, Evelyn, ran charity events, always immaculately dressed, effortlessly smiling, like she had stepped out of a magazine. She had this aura that made people feel they were in the presence of success itself. We lived in Connecticut, in a suburb so perfectly manicured it felt unreal. Trimmed hedges, identical street lamps, houses with flower boxes that looked too perfect to be real. Neighbors would wave politely, exchange pleasantries, and you could feel the unspoken competition, whose kid had the better grades, whose lawn was greener, whose family appeared more accomplished. I was their only child, the golden girl. Straight A's, piano lessons, summer programs at Yale, volunteering hours logged and double-checked. My parents loved to show me off. But looking back now, I realize they didn't really raise me, they raised an image. Everything I did wasn't for me, it was for the applause of others. Every achievement, every award, every polite smile had to reflect status, success, and their reputation. I remember one dinner when I was 12. I had just finished a small watercolor of the ocean, a painting I'd poured my excitement and imagination into. I ran into the dining room to show my parents, my hands trembling. "It's nice," my dad said, barely glancing up from his glass of wine. "Maybe you could sell it someday," my mom added, tapping her perfectly manicured nails on the table. I forced a smile, nodding politely. Inside, though, I felt crushed. My art wasn't supposed to be a product. It wasn't supposed to earn anything. It was supposed to make me happy. But happiness, apparently, wasn't enough. That night, I went to my room and stared at the painting, wondering when the part of me that existed for me would be enough. That was my childhood, constant performance, always measured against someone else's standards. Even birthday parties were competitions, the biggest cake, the most impressive guest list, the perfect decorations. I learned early that love and approval were never free, they were earned, traded in exchange for perfection. By the time I got to Yale, I had mastered the art of being perfect in public. I smiled when I wasn't happy. I nodded when I disagreed. I performed for teachers, classmates, and strangers because that was what I was trained to do. I thought I was content with that, until I met Daniel. He wasn't rich. He didn't care about social circles or labels. He was quiet, steady, and he laughed in a way that made you feel like you were the only person in the world that mattered at that moment. I remember spilling coffee all over my notes in the library one morning, a small disaster that could have ruined my perfectly organized day. Daniel appeared from nowhere, holding a stack of napkins. "Here, you'll need these," he said, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Thanks," I mumbled, flustered. But he didn't walk away. Instead, he stayed, helped me dry my papers, and somehow, without trying, turned what should have been an embarrassing moment into laughter. We ended up talking for hours that day, about books, about dreams, about the absurdity of campus life. For the first time, someone saw me, not my achievements, not my family's expectations, not the perfect image I projected, just me. I didn't tell my parents about him at first. I knew exactly what they'd say. When I finally did, my mother froze, her hand hovering over her teacup. "He's a barista?" she asked, her voice tight. "He's an engineer," I said, defending him automatically. "Engineering's respectable, but not elite," my dad added, leaning back in his chair, arms crossed. And in that instant, I realized their approval had strings attached. I could never be free, I could only be acceptable. When we graduated, Daniel came to my celebratory dinner. Polite, well-dressed, composed, but almost invisible. My parents barely acknowledged him beyond a passing nod. I left that night in tears, walking through the perfectly manicured garden and thinking about everything I had sacrificed to please them. Daniel took my hand gently as we sat on the steps. "One day," he whispered, "they'll see who you really are, not who they want you to be." I didn't understand those words then. Not fully. But somehow, deep down, I knew I needed to remember them. From that moment, I felt the first stirrings of something dangerous and beautiful: independence. It was terrifying, exhilarating, and it would eventually lead me to a life that was mine, entirely mine, away from the shadows of their expectations. When Daniel and I got engaged, my parents acted like I'd committed a crime. "Don't expect our blessing," my father said flatly, his eyes cold and sharp. And they meant it. There was no wiggle room, no hidden hope that they might come around. Just a statement, delivered like a verdict. My mother didn't even look at me. She turned her perfectly painted nails in my direction and said, "Sophia, think carefully. You don't want to make a mistake you can't undo." I remember feeling a strange mix of anger, sadness, and disbelief. The people who were supposed to support me, who were supposed to love me unconditionally, were telling me my happiness was unacceptable. But Daniel squeezed my hand, calm and steady as always, and whispered, "I don't care what they think. We're building our life together, Sophia. That's what matters." His words were simple, but they cut through the storm inside me like sunlight through clouds. The wedding itself was small and intimate, exactly how I wanted it. Friends and colleagues, a few distant relatives, laughter and tears everywhere. Daniel stood at the altar, nerves hidden behind a calm smile, holding my hands as if the world outside didn't exist. And maybe, for a moment, it didn't. But their seats remained empty. No calls. No visits. Not even a note. My phone stayed silent that day. Every time I glanced at the empty front row, my chest tightened. I told myself I didn't need them. I had Daniel. I had our love. But silence cuts deeper than words, especially when it stretches over years. After the wedding, Daniel and I moved into a tiny apartment in New Haven. It had one bedroom, one bathroom, and a kitchen barely big enough to share a coffee pot. The walls were thin, the floors creaked, and the view was a brick wall across the alley. But it was ours, and that made it feel like a palace. We worked tirelessly to make ends meet. I took an entry-level marketing job at a small firm, sending dozens of emails a day, designing campaigns, writing copy, anything that kept the lights on. Daniel worked long hours at his engineering startup, often coming home exhausted and covered in notes and sketches for projects that might never succeed. We survived on frozen dinners, instant coffee, and sheer determination. We had little money, less space, and almost no free time. Some nights, I'd sit at the kitchen table, head in my hands, staring at the stack of unpaid bills and wonder if I had made a mistake. I missed my parents in a way I hated, the warmth, the guidance, even their judgment. It felt like I had lost part of myself, and I didn't know if I'd ever get it back. Some nights, Daniel would find me crying silently into my laptop, the glow of the screen reflecting my exhaustion. "You're exactly where you're supposed to be," he'd whisper, pulling me close. He didn't say it to dismiss my feelings. He said it to remind me that the world we were building, imperfect and chaotic as it was ours. Slowly, over months and then years, life began to shift. Daniel's startup eventually offered him a stable position in Boston. The job paid well, had benefits, and the office was just a 20-minute commute from a small but charming apartment we could afford. We packed our car with boxes, a few pieces of furniture, and everything we didn't want to leave behind: photographs, books, and small mementos that reminded us who we were. As we drove away from Connecticut, I couldn't help but glance at the familiar streets one last time. My parents' house appeared in the distance, manicured and perfect. I didn't feel the longing I expected. I felt free. Boston was a rebirth. I started freelancing, doing small digital marketing projects on my laptop. At first, the work was grueling. I pitched clients who didn't respond, stayed up nights rewriting proposals, and wondered if I was talented enough to make it. Slowly, client by client, project by project, my skills grew. I learned to negotiate, to stand my ground, to believe in the value of my work. Every small success felt like a brick in a foundation that no one could take away. By the 4th year, I had my own marketing agency. For employees, clients I had built from scratch, campaigns that were seen by thousands of people. I remember sitting in my small office, staring at the first paycheck that was enough to cover the rent and then some, and feeling a surge of pride. Every dollar was proof that I didn't need my parents' world to succeed. Every late night, every rejection, every tear I had shed in New Haven had led to this. Daniel and I celebrated quietly. No champagne in grand ballrooms, no accolades from family we'd left behind, just a quiet dinner in our apartment, laughing and reminiscing about how far we had come. "We did it," I said, looking at him. "We always do," Daniel replied, smiling. It was more than success. It was survival. It was love. It was the first time I realized that my life could be my own, that I could be proud of myself without needing anyone's approval. And yet, even with everything we had built, there was a small gnawing thought in the back of my mind: when will they notice? Not because I needed their approval anymore, but because I wanted them to understand what they had missed, what they had underestimated. Little did I know that moment would come sooner than I expected, in a way that would test every ounce of patience, pride, and strength I had gained over the years. But life wasn't easy. Daniel's startup folded unexpectedly. After years of late nights, meticulous planning, and endless hope, the company went under. Our savings, painstakingly built over the years, were almost gone overnight. The tiny Boston apartment we had been renting suddenly felt smaller, colder. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the dwindling bank balance, the silence of the apartment pressing in. Daniel was sitting across from me, trying to hide the fear in his eyes, but I could see it. We were both terrified. We faced nights where I doubted everything: my career, my choices, even the love that had once felt unshakable. I asked myself the same questions every night. Had I been too ambitious? Was I too naive to think we could survive on our own? Would we ever recover? Sleep became scarce. I would lie awake, heart pounding, thinking about how easy it would have been to turn back, to go back to the world my parents knew and approved of, where safety came with their conditional love. But Daniel never let me surrender to despair. One night, after a particularly exhausting day, I slumped into the sofa, tears streaming down my face. "I don't know if I can do this," I whispered. He knelt in front of me, holding my hands tightly. "Sophia," he said, his voice steady, "look at me. We've been through worse than this together. You are stronger than you realize. I believe in you. We'll find a way. We always do." I nodded, exhausted, but for the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of hope. We were not defeated yet. The turning point came a few months later. One of my older clients referred a major company to my agency. I remember opening the email, reading it over and over, unable to believe it. My hands shook, My heart raced. Daniel, who had been working silently in the corner, noticed my reaction. "Is it real?" he asked. Yes, it is," I exclaimed, unable to keep the excitement out of my voice. That client became the lifeline that pulled us out of our darkest financial moments. Suddenly, things started shifting. I was working 12-hour days, pouring every ounce of energy into campaigns, meetings, and proposals. Every success, no matter how small, felt monumental. Each satisfied client brought another, and gradually, my agency grew. From a one-woman operation, I expanded to a team of 4 talented individuals who shared my passion and drive. I trained them, mentored them, and watched as our projects began to make an impact. The small Boston apartment began to feel cramped. Our dreams, once intangible, were now tangible, pressing against the walls that had once confined us. Daniel encouraged me to look at real estate, to consider the future we had always imagined but had been too afraid to reach for. We spent countless weekends touring neighborhoods, weighing the pros and cons, imagining what life could be. And then finally we found it, our dream house, a $2 million modern home, sunlight flooding through enormous glass walls, minimalist yet warm, a space that felt like us. I still remember the day we moved in. I stepped into the living room, the morning sun reflecting off polished floors, highlighting the emptiness that, in that moment, felt perfect. I could hear the faint hum of the city outside, but inside, it was quiet. Peaceful. Daniel looked at me, a mixture of pride and awe in his eyes. "We did it," I whispered, almost in disbelief. "Told you," Daniel said, his smile wide and knowing. "One day they'll see who you really are." I laughed softly, because yes, I knew they would. But in that moment, I didn't care about them. Not really. This was about us, our perseverance, our love, and the life we had built from scratch. That first night in the house, we unpacked slowly. I placed photographs from our early years on the shelves, the tiny New Haven apartment, the first office space I had rented, Daniel's sketches from his startup. Each item was a testament to the struggle, the sleepless nights, the tears and laughter that had led to this point. We cooked dinner together in the spacious kitchen, laughing at the absurdity of our journey, the burnt edges of our first attempt at homemade pasta, a small reminder that life isn't perfect, but it's ours. Sitting by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the sprawling backyard, I realized something profound. Success wasn't just measured by money or possessions. It was measured by resilience, by the ability to endure hardships and come out stronger. It was measured by love, by the man who had held my hand through every storm, who had believed in me even when I doubted myself. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. Free from the expectations of my parents, free from the pressure to be perfect, free from the fear of failure. The weight of years of unspoken judgment had lifted. I had built a life that was mine, a life that no one could undermine. And yet, deep down, I knew the moment of reckoning would come. The day they would finally see me, not the obedient, image-perfect daughter they wanted, but the woman I had fought to become. I didn't know how they would react. I didn't know if I wanted their reaction. But I was ready. Because I had survived. Because I had thrived. And because, in the end, Daniel and I had proven that love, perseverance, and self-belief could conquer even the deepest wounds. 2 months after moving into our dream house, a lifestyle magazine ran a feature on our home and my marketing career. The article was glossy, filled with pictures of sunlight streaming through the glass walls, Daniel and me smiling in the spacious living room, and captions highlighting my agency's growth. I had long since stopped caring about whether my parents approved of me, but something about seeing that article made my phone vibrate in my hand with a strange sense of anticipation. Then, late that evening, it rang. An unknown Connecticut number flashed across the screen. My heart skipped a beat. Sophia. The voice was tentative, unfamiliar yet intimately familiar. "Hi," Mom, I said cautiously, trying to keep my voice even. There was a pause. Then she spoke, each word careful, as if testing the waters. I saw the article. Your house looks lovely. Lovely. The word struck me like a dagger and a key at the same time. It acknowledged my success, but it also came laden with the weight of years of absence, judgment, and silent rejection. I swallowed hard, unsure whether to feel anger, satisfaction, or something in between. I didn't answer immediately. I let her words hang in the air like an unspoken challenge. Finally, I said, "Thank you. Listen, Daniel and I would like you to come for dinner." There was silence on the other end. Then a soft, almost imperceptible inhale. We'll be there. The day of the dinner arrived, and I spent hours preparing. Daniel helped me set the table, arranging the silverware with precision while I placed flowers in a vase. I wore a dress I knew my mother would notice, not extravagant, but elegant, understated, a statement of confidence. When their black Mercedes pulled into the driveway, my pulse quickened. Pearls, tailored suits, the kind of careful appearance they had always used to silently judge me, it was all there. The moment they stepped through the door, they froze. I could see it, my father's eyes flicking across the living room, taking in the expansive space, the minimalistic decor, the evidence of the life I had built. My mother's lips pressed together, her hands gripping her purse as if it were a lifeline. "Well, I can see you've done well," my father said finally, his voice measured, cautious. "You thought I'd embarrass you," I replied, keeping my tone calm but firm. "You missed my wedding, ignored my calls, and now you want a tour of my success?" My mother's eyes glistened. For a moment, the poised, untouchable woman I had grown up with seemed smaller, uncertain. "We made a mistake," she whispered, almost inaudibly. I took a deep breath. I wanted her to feel the weight of years lost, of moments missed, of silence that had been louder than words. "Family is conditional," I said slowly, deliberately. "So is forgiveness." We sat at the dining table, a delicate tension hanging between us. The first course was served, and we ate in a silence that was not entirely uncomfortable. It was charged electric, as if every bite, every glance, every movement carried unspoken truths. Finally, my father broke the quiet, asking about the agency. He spoke carefully, avoiding anything that sounded like judgment. I answered politely, briefly, letting the details linger in the air, each one a subtle reminder of how far I had come without their support. "You've really built something impressive," he admitted, almost grudgingly. I nodded, silently acknowledging the compliment, but aware of the years of absence that made it bitterly ironic. "It wasn't easy," I said. "You weren't there to see the nights I stayed up crying over missed deadlines or the times I questioned myself. But I made it through. With Daniel." Daniel reached across the table and squeezed my hand. His calm presence grounded me. He had been with me through every step, and unlike them, he had never doubted me. We talked for hours. We cried. We laughed awkwardly, like strangers relearning how to connect. My mother's voice faltered at times, my father shifted uncomfortably, but eventually they began to ask questions, real questions, not the shallow, controlling ones they had asked during my childhood. Do you enjoy your work?" my mother asked. "I do," I replied. "I love it. And I love that I get to make choices for myself without fear of judgment." "And Daniel, he's been supportive?" my father asked. "He's been my partner," I said simply. "Every step of the way. Without him, I wouldn't be here today." Their silence spoke volumes. They couldn't argue with truth. They couldn't undo the years of absence. But they could finally see me, the real me, not the daughter molded to fit their image. At one point, I excused myself to fetch dessert, taking a deep breath as I leaned against the counter. I reflected on all the years I had spent seeking approval that would never come, all the nights I had cried, all the moments I had felt invisible. I realized then that this dinner wasn't about making them feel guilty. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my power, showing them I had built a life that didn't require their validation. I returned with dessert, placing it gently on the table. My parents' eyes followed every movement, cautious, observant, almost reverent. I served them, and then sat down, letting the silence settle comfortably this time. "We're proud of you," my father said eventually, and I could tell the words were genuine, albeit delayed. I allowed myself a small, private smile. It didn't erase the past, but it acknowledged that the present was mine. I had built it, piece by piece, without them. Hours passed. We told stories from the past, shared awkward jokes, laughed at memories that had once caused pain. The night wasn't perfect, but it was real. For the first time in decades, I felt a strange kind of connection, not because they had earned it, but because I had chosen to give it. When they finally left, I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel a sense of victory. I felt relief. Showing them I didn't need them, that I had thrived without them, was more than enough. The years of pain, the absence, the judgment, it all boiled down to one simple truth: I was enough with or without their approval. As I closed the door behind them, Daniel wrapped his arms around me. "You handled that beautifully," he said. "It wasn't about handling them," I replied softly. "It was about handling myself." And I did. I looked around the living room, our home, our life, and I realized that the journey wasn't just about success or revenge. It was about reclaiming my identity, my voice, and my happiness. The empty seats at my wedding had long since lost their power over me. And now, sitting in the quiet aftermath of a long-awaited confrontation, I finally felt free. After that dinner, I needed time to process everything. I walked through my childhood streets, the familiar sidewalks, the neatly trimmed hedges, the houses that had always felt so perfect and untouchable. The quiet hum of the neighborhood brought back a flood of memories: my parents' criticism, the dinners filled with expectation instead of warmth, the long, silent nights spent questioning myself. I could have knocked on their door, demanded answers, shouted all the things I had swallowed for years. But as I walked past their house, I realized something important. My story wasn't for them anymore, it was for me. The power I had gained wasn't about forcing them to acknowledge me. It wasn't about proving anything to them. It was about reclaiming my own life, my own happiness, and my own identity. Every tear I had shed, every sleepless night, every fear of failure had led to this moment of clarity. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into work, but differently this time. I began mentoring young women, guiding them through the challenges I had once faced. I helped them navigate corporate politics, start businesses, and find confidence in their own decisions. Each time I saw a young woman succeed, land a client, or finally speak up for herself, I saw a reflection of my younger self, a version of Sophia who had been scared, silenced, and unsure of her worth. I felt a surge of pride, a sense of purpose that was deeper than any promotion or paycheck. Sometimes, I realized, revenge isn't about making someone suffer. It's about proving to yourself that you can thrive without them. My parents had ignored my wedding, dismissed my choices, and tried to define my happiness for me. But I had created a life that was bigger, richer, and more meaningful than anything they could have imagined. I had built it without them, and that was my quiet, unshakable victory. Forgiveness came slowly. Not because they necessarily deserved it, but because I deserved peace. Carrying resentment had weighed me down for years. Each time I replayed their absence, their criticism, their disappointment in my mind, it kept me tethered to a past that no longer belonged to me. Forgiving them didn't erase the past, but it allowed me to step forward without carrying its heavy chains. I started to see my $2 million home differently. It was no longer a symbol to wave in front of my parents' faces, no longer a trophy of triumph. It became a sanctuary, a testament to perseverance, hard work, and resilience. Every corner, every sunbeam streaming through the glass walls, reminded me of nights spent working until dawn, of moments when I almost gave up but didn't. The walls held memories of laughter, of small victories, and of love, a love that had carried me through every storm. I often sat by the large living room window in the mornings, drinking coffee, watching the city wake up. I reflected on the journey, from the tiny apartment in New Haven with its creaky floors, to long nights filled with doubt, to this expansive home that held everything Daniel and I had built together. The journey wasn't linear, and it wasn't easy, but it was mine. Every misstep, every challenge, had shaped me into someone stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. Daniel and I celebrated our milestones quietly. Sometimes we would reminisce about our early struggles, the nights of instant noodles, the fear of failure, the endless grind, and laugh at how far we had come. Other times, we would simply sit in silence, holding hands, appreciating the life we had built. There was no need for validation from the past, no need to prove anything to anyone else. Our happiness was enough. I realized that true closure doesn't always come in dramatic confrontations or in grand statements. It comes from within. It comes from recognizing your own worth, honoring your journey, and allowing yourself to thrive despite those who doubted you. My parents' recognition had come late, but by that time, I no longer needed it. I had already claimed my life, my happiness, and my identity. Sometimes, I still think about the empty seats at my wedding. I used to feel anger, pain, and sadness when I imagined them sitting there, watching, approving. But now, those empty seats feel like a reminder of the strength I had to cultivate, the courage I had to summon, and the independence I had to embrace. They were not a loss, they were a catalyst. Looking back, I understand something fundamental. You can't control others, you can't force love or approval, and you certainly can't rewrite the past. But you can shape your present, define your own happiness, and live life on your terms. And when you do, that life becomes a reward in itself, richer than any praise, deeper than any revenge, and infinitely more fulfilling than seeking validation from those who failed to give it. I walk through my home now with gratitude. I see every detail as a testament to resilience. The office where I built my agency, the kitchen where Daniel and I experimented with recipes while laughing at our mistakes, the living room where we held our first quiet dinner party with friends. It's not just a house, it's a story of survival, of love, and of triumph over doubt and betrayal. And as I stand there, I think back to the little girl who had once painted a watercolor of the ocean, only to be told it wasn't enough. She's still there in me, stronger, wiser, and free. I carry her with pride, knowing that I have built a life that she would have been proud of, not for anyone else, but for herself. Someone once said, "You didn't need revenge. You needed peace." I never truly understood those words until I stood in my living room, sunlight streaming through the glass walls of the home Daniel and I had built together. At first, I thought my happiness, my success, my $2 million house would be the ultimate proof to my parents, proof to the world, that I had succeeded without their support. But standing there, I realized that all of that wasn't for anyone else. It was for me. If you've ever been dismissed, rejected, or told that your choices make you less, know this: you don't need anyone's permission to build your life. You don't need applause, approval, or validation. Every challenge you face, every obstacle you overcome, every moment you fight to be yourself is your own victory. That strength, that resilience, is yours to own, and it cannot be taken from you. My parents remembered me the moment they saw my house. The image of their hesitation, their shock, even their attempts at praise, all of it played in my mind. But I no longer needed it to feel complete. What mattered was that I remembered who I was, who I had been, and what I had achieved through sheer determination, love, and patience. That knowledge, of my worth, of my independence, of my ability to thrive despite betrayal, mattered far more than anything they could ever say. I've learned that closure isn't about confrontation. It's about embracing your own journey, forgiving not because someone deserves it, but because you deserve peace. It's about reclaiming your narrative and understanding that happiness comes from within. And now, as I continue building my life, my career, and the relationships that truly matter, I know that the best revenge isn't about hurting anyone else. It's about thriving, living fully, and proving to yourself that you are enough. If you love stories like mine, filled with love, betrayal, and emotional closure, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Every week, there are real-life stories waiting to inspire, to provoke thought, and to remind us all of the power of resilience, courage, and self-worth.